Lathe. Mounting and dismounting of chucks. Content covered. 1. Need of work holding devices. 2. Precaution to avoid damage. 3. Chuck mounting methods. 4. Dismounting of chucks. Need of work holding devices. To perform lathe operations on work materials, it may not always be possible to have only one type of work holding device fitted to the spindle. Hence, it becomes necessary to dismount the work holding device already assembled to the spindle and mount that work holding device needed for the work in hand. Precaution to avoid damage. The mounting of work holding devices, that is, chucks, is illustrated to understand different spindle noses and their applications easily. When mounting a chuck on the headstock spindle, exercise care to prevent damage from occurring to the chuck or spindle. Damage may reduce the accuracy of the lathe. Precaution to avoid damage before mounting. To prevent such damage from occurring, take the following steps. 1. Before attempting to mount a chuck, ensure that it is the correct one for the lathe and job in hand. 2. Do not use power to mount a chuck on spindle noses. 3. Place a wooden board on the lathe bed when mounting light chucks to prevent damage to the slideways. 4. A wooden cradle should be placed between the chucks and the lathe bed to support the chuck for large chucks. 5. In addition to protecting the bed slideways, it makes fitting the chuck easier and safer. 6. Always seek assistance from mounting large and heavy chucks. 7. Lubricate the mating surfaces with a light film or foil. Precaution to avoid damage after mounting. 1. Set the speed change lever to the slowest speed. 2. Turn on the power to the motor and switch on the motor. 3. Engage the clutch lever. 4. The chuck would now begin revolving. 5. Check that the diameter and face of the chuck are running true by observing the surfaces. Now there are various mounting methods for jaw chucks. Let's talk about some of them. 1. Mounting the chuck onto the threaded spindle. The back plate will get involved in this process and it must be threaded. So it will require a lot of your time, but the method is simple. 1. Switch off the motor. 2. Place the chuck on the wooden plank or cradle and slide it close to the spindle nose. 3. Turn the spindle anti-clockwise by hand and engage the chuck on the spindle threads. 4. Set the speed change lever to the slowest speed. Screw the chuck in until it fits firmly on the spindle. 5. The chuck should easily screw into the spindle. If any resistance is felt, remove the chuck and check that the threads are clean and not damaged. 2. Mounting on tapered spindle. Clean both tapers of all grease and grit. With the chuck jaws completely refracted into the chuck and using a thin piece of wood to protect the chuck nose, tap the chuck into place on the spindle. 1. Switch off the motor. 2. Hence the chuck on the wooden board or cradle and slide it close to the spindle nose. 3. Turn the spindle by hand until the key on the spindle nose lines up with the keyway in the chuck. 4. Set the speed change lever to the slowest speed. 5. Push the chuck onto the spindle and turn the locking ring anti-clockwise. 6. The figure here illustrates a small chuck held with both hands and mounted. 7. Engage the special C-spanner on the locking ring. 8. The spanner should fit around the top of the locking ring with the handle pointing downwards. 9. Grip the end of the handle with one hand and firmly strike the other end with the other hand in an anti-clockwise direction. 10. This would securely tighten the locking ring. 3. Mounting on a cam lock spindle. It is another useful and effective method for mounting the chuck. 1. Switch off the motor. 2. Place the chuck on a wooden board or cradle and slide it close to the spindle nose. 3. Disengage the clutch to permit free rotation of the spindle. 4. Insert the correct chuck key into a cam locking screw on the spindle. 5. Turn each cam locking screw so that the registration line is vertical or aligns with the corresponding line on the spindle. Next, turn the spindle by hand until the clearance holes on the spindle align with the cam lock studs on the chuck. 6. Set the speed and change the lever to its slowest speed. Push the chuck onto the spindle. Tighten each cam lock screw in a clockwise direction. Mounting onto a bolted spindle. 1. Switch off the motor. 2. Place the chuck on a wooden board or cradle. 3. Remove nuts and washers from the studs on the chuck. 4. Disengage the clutch to permit free rotation of the spindle. 5. Turn the spindle by hand until the key in the spindle lines up with the slot in the chuck. 6. Set the speed. Change the lever to the slowest speed. Push the chuck onto the spindle and fit washers and nuts to the studs. 7. Tighten the nuts in an anti-clockwise direction using a spanner on the opposite nuts. 8. Hold the chuck in position when fitting nuts. Dismounting chucks from a threaded spindle. 1. Switch off the motor. 2. Set the speed change lever to the slowest speed. Place a solid wooden block between one of the chuck jaws and the rear of the lathe bed. 3. The length of the wooden block should be slightly less than the center height of the lathe. 4. Turn the lathe spindle clockwise by hand to loosen the chuck from the spindle nose. 5. Remove the wooden block and place the wooden board or cradle on the lathe bed. Next, unscrew the chuck from the spindle and clean and store the chuck. In this video, we learned about the basic principles of mounting and dismounting chucks. Thank you.